Oh, you did? I saw the word. That's good. Oh, you did? I saw the word. Oh, you did? I saw the word. Oh, you did? I saw the word. What is that? Hello? Thank you. What is that? Hello? Ah.
Sorry.
Is that Esther?
Hello.
Hi.
Yep.
Hello.
Hi there. All right. So the cameras are pointing all kinds of weird directions here, but we are switched over. If I can just get.
That's fellow
There you go.
jitster.
Yeah. So that means somebody needs to set their username by clicking on the chat in the little middle there and adding their name. That way everybody knows who's who. Okay, come on. Boy, everything's frozen from the cold. Oh, man. All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Ea Tolkien Society. This is our first one of the year, January 13th, 2024. And it unfortunately might be the last one at the RPG Community Center if we can't get donations in fast. So, but we are here, the studio's here at the RPG Community Center in Spokane, Washington, 101 North Stone Street. And if you haven't yet donated, please hurry and swing by rpgresearch.com/donate. Hurry and donate. We're behind on rent because donations have been so down the last 6 months that if we can't come up with about 10 grand before February, we only need about 50 grand a year and we're golden. We cover everything. We're super efficient. But unfortunately, donations have barely been enough to cover the power bill, let alone rent, in the last 6 months. So we're trying to just everybody who can donate anything, please do, and then help spread the word. And if we can hurry and get caught up on the back rent, then we'll save the place. If we don't raise 10 grand before February 1st, then we will lose the place for good. And that would be awful. We'll still have to pay another year's worth of rent. Actually, I'll personally be stuck because I had to guarantee the nonprofit because the nonprofit was too small. So I'll still have to pay another like $40,000 in rent for a year's rent, but we won't have a place to rent. So anybody who can, please donate and spread the word, and let's see if we can hurry and get the community involved to save the place. And then we can keep meeting here.
Hey, Hawk, is that URL on the website?
It's not on the Tolkien Society one. But if you go to rpgresearch.com/donate.
I think you put the link in the email, didn't you?
I did in the email, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I got the email.
Okay.
Sorry to hear that, Hawk.
Yeah.
Tough
Yeah.
times for nonprofits.
It is. It's going around. The problem is, since I was a personal guarantor on top of it all, he could then go to seize all my assets. I could lose everything personally as well. Because if it goes to litigation, then the bill goes from 40 grand to like 400 grand potentially. So.
Well, I think he'll recognize that if it should come that we can't save the RPG Research Center, that if you do have to vacate, that as long as you're paying something, I think is not going to play hardball with you.
The problem is it's not just him. Another lawyer is now involved, and the people who they represent. So,
really?
Yeah, he would play nice with me, but the letter is from another lawyer. They're from the property owners, so they are threatening to go after all my assets and force me to liquidate everything I own. Which would mean I'd have to sell everything I have because it could go as high as 400 grand. So that's why it's like, the center's at risk. And yes, I'm personally at risk because I took a chance backing up the nonprofit to get this place for everybody, and it could ruin me. So I'm hoping it won't come to that, but it's a nail biter. Anyway, so please, if anybody can donate, all of it goes to the nonprofit. It's not going to me or anything, and it is a 501c3. And if you keep track of your donation, if it's large enough, you can do it as a tax write-off too. Tax ID is on the bottom of the website and in the email and everywhere. We have our tax ID everywhere. So you use that tax ID when you file your taxes next year, and that can help if it's a large enough sum, depending upon your tax advisor. Okay. Meanwhile, onward with Tolkien Society. So we are here at the center because of the low donations. We've had the heat off, which means trying to get it warmed up today has been nearly impossible. I mean, it's not as cold in here as it was outside, but it's still like 45 degrees in here, which is better than the single digits out there.
Yeah.
But it's still, we're freezing.
And you see Is your breath like the very smoke of Smaug the dragon?
Interestingly, not. It's just
It was
above.
outside. It was outside.
It is outside. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like you're vaping outside. You know. So.
I know. I'm lucky. I've moved to Renton a couple months ago, so
Oh.
it's not nearly as cold here.
Yeah, that's much more temperate. Oh, did you just put all the notes? Okay.
You
Let
did?
me,
Yes, I did.
because that is ephemeral as far as that chat. The one we're all gone, it will be gone. So let me hurry and
I
copy
know.
that.
Yeah, I know. I forgot to email it
That's
to you.
okay. That's okay. I got it. I'll
But
get
for
it in there.
today's meeting, people may want to refer to it
Yeah.
as I read it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. All
I,
right.
I wanted to apologize for missing the last couple of meetings. I went through a divorce, and then I moved
Oh.
over here, so I've just been really busy.
Condolences. Well, we're glad you could make it, and we're glad you're back.
And is it Emily? I'm trying to remember your first name.
Esther,
Esther.
Esther starts with E. Wrong name. Sorry. Okay, so
Okay.
Esther. I think also you said that you might need to bow out early. We totally understand. So whenever you feel like you need to, stay as long as you want. So that's no problem.
Okay.
Glad to have you.
So the Ea Tolkien Society meets every month to discuss all things Tolkien and Tolkien adjacent. All levels of interest and knowledge are welcome. Some of us are more scholarly and others are much more casual in fandom, and some are gaming related, and all are welcome. We've been meeting since I think 2005. We are an official Smial, it's a chapter of the UK Tolkien Society, and we stream live on YouTube. .com/Tolkien Scholars, and we meet every second Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time, and our website is tolkienscholars.org, and we're also on Twitter or X at Tolkien Scholars. All right, got all that out of the way. Brian, Mr. Secretary, if you want to go through the introductions and then the notes and all that, you have the floor,
Sure.
sir.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hawk. Yeah. So welcome everybody. So the meeting notes from December 9th, 2023 are as follows for the Ea Tolkien Society. We had a discussion on the November meeting regarding Tolkien and the Great War, which is a book by John Garth and of course also a topic of j.r.r. Tolkien and his experiences being in World War I. And then we also kind of recapped the discussion of different foreign language translations of the Ringverse, which is very interesting. And to hear that, and that's something at some point in the future I would enjoy more of. Gary and I are still waiting for the Italian version, right, Gary?
yes.
So
We covered the German and,
yes,
and
but I don't know, if there is a chance that possibly we might get our Italian friend to join us, but it's just
Well, it's the middle of the
very
night
late.
for her, yeah.
It's very late there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so moving on. New items. Anthony mentioned the new letters of j.r.r. Tolkien just out, and the numbering system is the same because, of course, now that since the first edition, now there are specific numbered letters that are referenced, like the one to Milton Waldman. And everybody knows it as letter 131, I think it is.
Yeah.
151.
151.
Thank you,
Okay.
Anthony.
Yeah.
151. So if you renumbered all the letters, that would really
yeah.
throw everybody off, and then
Yeah.
people would be referring to the wrong letters. So just additions labeled A, B, etc. Quite a few new ones that Anthony shared with us. So thank you for doing that, Anthony.
Yep.
So that's while getting. Sorry, Gary, I encouraged you to buy that copy last year, and now it's already obsolete.
Yeah.
Deprecated.
It's now valuable because it's a first edition. And then Hawk shared several cookbooks, which were really fun. Recipes from the World of Tolkien by Robert Tousley Anderson, and the unofficial Tolkien cookbook. And I say that with a northern Lancashire accent, since Tolkien was Lancashire Fusiliers, even though he was not from northern England, he was actually from the Midlands. But I love it. When I lived in Warrington, up north near Liverpool, people would say cookbook. But anyway, so the unofficial Tolkien
before you go
cookbook is
on,
not written.
before you go on, Brian, how long is it going to take for this to become valuable?
It already was.
It will
as you
take
well
what
know.
it takes.
Just listen. All you have to do is get the additions, print them off, shrink them down, insert them in to the book. You can make this work.
Okay.
And then also, along with those cookbooks, we then had a big discussion about fantasy cookbooks. And our limited but interesting list included the Dragonlance cookbook, the Song of Ice and Fire cookbook, the Star Trek cookbook, Redwall recipes, Stormlight archives, etc. Super fun talking about that. Feel free, Esther, to throw in any other ones you happen to know personally of cookbooks.
Oh. And not fantastical ones.
Okay, but maybe sci-fi. I don't know. Anyway, and then Gary.
I'll take a look out in my library for you guys next time I go.
Sounds good. And then Gary, you shared an article about Italian Tolkien cosplayers recreating the Fellowship, bringing the ring to Mount Doom, actually Mount Vesuvius, and throwing it in, that was pretty amazing. Very committed.
That is.
So I mean, we're taking LARP to a whole new level there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Chris shared news about Italy's prime minister in reference to Tolkien and The Guardian. And also then from there we went on to a new topic, which was the Father Christmas letters. Being December, we thought it'd be appropriate to refer to that. And it was a connection to Tolkien Route 16, which was in 2020, that year of years. We actually had a wonderful treat. Even though Tolkien Route could not meet, we had, technically as far as the role-playing piece could not happen, but we did still have our panel discussion, and John Garth suddenly had his calendar cleared, so he said yes. One thing that happened from the pandemic, well, one of several, but anyway, so John Garth was part of our panel discussion, and he shared that he found that in 1936, when there was a terrible flood in England, at the very same time, he wrote in his Father Christmas letter for that year that the polar bear, I think it was named PB, at the North Pole, drew a bath and left it on and didn't come back in time, and it overflowed the bathtub and just flooded the whole North Pole. And so it was kind of an interesting thing, and it was a connection to Numenor and the flood of Numenor. So there was all these, because this is 1936 is when Tolkien's writing more about Numenor. And then, what did we talk about? Letter 222 of Tolkien's letters, which referenced Sir Gawain. It looks like Gawain, but it's the story is taken from the Midlands dialect of Anglo-Saxon, and so the pronunciation is Gawain. So Sir Gawain the Green Knight, Pearl and Sir Orfeo. These were things that Tolkien wrote, but they were very short, and so he was dealing with wanting to get those published, and they were not actually published until 1975, after j.r.r. Tolkien's death. We went on to letter 223. Tolkien said he was very busy, and he was working on the Ancrene Wissa. Anthony, did I say that correct?
Oh, probably. I would need to look at the text.
Anyway, then we went on to letter 224, which was about C.S. Lewis, both of them as teachers, and also a little bit of a frustration on Tolkien's part that Lewis seems to just borrow bits from Tolkien's legendarium without asking.
I started reading the Inklings, and yeah, it seems Lewis has like a pretty big ego when it comes to his writing, and like Tolkien is a little bit more hesitant about publishing his works, and then.
Yeah.
Well, especially his Middle Earth related, he was very self-deprecating.
Yeah.
I think what we see with, like, as in with everyone, moments when they're full of themselves, as sometimes I am, and then other times when they give you the shirt off their back. Tolkien is well known for being more rigid as he got older. and uncharitable, but sometimes with authors you thought were quite good when he was younger, and he's like, George MacDonald, garbage. So I think same thing with Lewis. Lewis, I would say what that was is that as Tolkien and Lewis and their friends, they even shared these ideas, and you get Charles
Williams?
Williams, thank you. I was thinking Morris. Charles Williams involved. I think somewhat of the idea. I think Tolkien took a more private property approach to his IP, and I think Lewis saw it as they were discussing all these things. It was kind of like this common hoard and treasure trove that they all drew from, kind of a library of ideas. So I don't think Lewis was like, aha, I'm gonna plagiarize. I think it was more like we talked about Numenor, but Tolkien hadn't nailed it down. I mean, the Silmarillion wasn't even published until after he died. So these things were kind of in the ether, and Tolkien, of course, being a great secondary world builder, took his time, and Lewis was more happy to just publish it as it was. But obviously some friction there. And then the year coming, 2024, talking about what do we want to do as the Tolkien, the Ea Tolkien Society. We discussed finishing the Arthurian stuff, so we'll do that this month. We talked about this year coming back to the Kalevala, and maybe the Nibelungen meet, some of these influences on Tolkien, which is really what we've been doing for the last year and a half to 2 years, has been looking at who did Tolkien influence, who were his contemporaries, and then what sources influenced Tolkien. So that's been fun. And then we kind of followed on with, obviously this year we'll have responses perhaps to Amazon. Rings of Power Season 2, Gary's favorite. Looking forward to it with an anxious anticipation. Emphasis on the anxious.
Humor, I recognize that.
Well, as long as it's entertaining, I'm okay with it.
Lower your expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty funny because you've shared like several things. Like, I watched. What was the? I think it was the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time adaptation. You were like, yeah, it's okay. And I've heard the same thing about the Shannara adaptations.
Oh no, that was horrible. That was awful.
I'm not a big fan of. I haven't been a big fan of sci-fi in the written form, other than Tolkien. Okay, but I've never read anything, from Robert Jordan or any of the others, and so to me it was all new.
Sure.
Wheel of Time and
Yep.
Shannara. Shannara I thought was really, really short. And the TV adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm both at a disadvantage to you folks, and both at an advantage.
At an advantage. That's true. Any thoughts on that?
I think that are we still talking about the Rings of Power?
Yeah, I'm just mentioning.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Adaptations, you don't have to comment on Rings of Power, but it was just that was the kind of the moment of talking about how often even really well-meaning people with lots and lots of money, it can be sometimes underwhelming. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you know of a good adaptation that you think is fantastic.
Well, one adaptation that I've been watching lately is the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief series that Disney's been making. And I read those books when I was a little kid, and I read all of them as soon as they came out. So I have high standards for this series, definitely, and I think that they've been that they cast all of the characters really well, and they're like staying true to the storyline, which is something I'm a bit of a stickler for when it comes from the movie adaptation from books, like especially like in Harry Potter and stuff. I feel like they could have done so much better in their adaptations from the books to the movies.
Do you think that it's more of a travesty to change the plot line or the characters?
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you think is more?
I think that, are you you talking about like the character's personality or like their appearance?
I guess, yeah, maybe not the core of who they are, but just like, well, for example, my wife really was bothered by how Faramir was changed in the Peter Jackson movies. I was like, yeah, that's not who he really is in the books, but I was less taken aback by it, because of how it ends. So yeah, more kind of like just messing about with and changing up what the characters are like or what they do.
I think that like their storyline is more important personally because like in the new adaptation of the Percy Jackson and the Legacies, they have the Annabeth, the female lead. She looks completely different than she does in the books, but her personality really like shines. Like I think her acting is really good, and I think that like if you're able to present the character like it is in the book, I want to see what it's like on the screen, like how I imagine how it is when I read it.
Right. Yeah. I guess it doesn't, it doesn't completely match ever, but it's all about how faithfully they do it. It is an adaptation, but it can be a good one. So, Anthony, any thoughts on that before we move on to the rest of the notes?
I don't have too much to say than what I've already said before. I think.
Okay.
As far as Lord of the Rings is concerned, I sort of read the book. I read Two Towers of Return of the King concurrently as the Peter Jackson films were coming out, and I personally loved the Peter Jackson trilogy to the point where it kind of served as a gateway to studying Tolkien's work more in depth. So,
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
Sure. Okay, well, in a sense, that also maybe establishes a standard by which some people have judged the Rings of Power, right? I mean, aside from the books, they would be like, well, that's a whole other thing of like, what are we judging things by? By the books? Or are we judging it by the Jackson trilogy, etc.? So, all right. So then we talked about music. This year, we discussed the fact that it'd be great to have a meeting just on music in Tolkien, how he uses it, the presence of music and its importance all throughout the Legendarium. And then finally, we talked about January, that we'd finally get around to reading The Fall of Arthur. And then recap. Hawk, if you would be willing to do, I think we had said that you were going to do a recap for the D&D 50th anniversary, but I forgot to send the notes to you, so it's okay if you want to delay that. It can be any time this year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we do have. It is the 50th anniversary all year.
Yeah.
and they're trying to come out with a new version of D&D as well. The 6th edition, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, they're trying to make it like a 5.5 sort of. They want to make it backwards compatible.
So those are my notes.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know much report on that, but yeah, okay. And I have more books because last time it was from my birthday. Now this time I have more books from Christmas to share.
Great.
So.
Fantastic.
I started reading The Fall of Arthur like you guys told me to, and I definitely understand the hype.
The hype?
The hype. Yeah, you guys hyped it up last time. I was talking to you guys, and I understand like the writing. He like the whole story. He writes it equally as passionate throughout the whole book.
Absolutely.
So you enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think I have a little bit more to go, but I've definitely enjoyed it so far.
Oh, great.
It is definitely something I have to sit down and concentrate to read,
Yes.
though. Which is hard because I live with my little sister now. She's 8, so she's like.
Yeah. What's this about?
So.
Yeah, I mean Tolkien has some light and fluffy stuff, in the Tolkien Reader, and with Farmer Giles of Ham and Smith of Witten Major and all those. He has some light, fluffy, fun stuff. But then he's got that heavy stuff between the Silmarillion and a lot of other works.
It's not just dense, but it's so like physically, but it's so emotionally like dense as well. You have to process so much, and there's not like a lot of time to process things because it's like kind of in poetry form. You have to process things yourself instead of the character processing things through the rest of their story.
It's not something we practice very often. It's you have to go back and reread things, and then more comes out. It's really something else. And that's why it's good to read authors from other time periods. And Tolkien is unique in the sense that he wrote in the mid-20th century, but he really was steeped in medieval literature. So he wrote consciously more like people did at that time. So it's kind of a blend. So maybe it would be good to, since you'll have to leave before the end, should we start perhaps with the Fall of Arthur and do the Letters of Tolkien afterwards, or how does everybody want to do that?
Yeah, I think. Well, sorry. Go ahead, Esther.
Oh, I was going to say that sounds fine.
May I go through the latest book editions here before we jump into that?
Yes, please, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. All right, so we have Tolkien in the 21st Century, The Meaning of Middle-earth Today by Nick Groom. It says...
Okay, hold on. Say that title again, please.
Tolkien in the 21st Century, The Meaning of Middle-earth Today by Nick Groom, G.R.R.
Okay.
A finalist for the 2023 Tolkien Society Best Book Award. And it's got Brian Sibley, so these are people giving comments about it. Brian Sibley, The Mail on Sunday, The Literary Review, New York Times, Book Review, and The New Yorker. Okay, an original and thought-provoking journey into j.r.r. Tolkien's world, revealing how his visionary creation of Middle-earth is more relevant now than ever before. What is it about Middle-earth and its inhabitants that has captured the imagination of millions of people around the world? And why does Tolkien's visionary creation continue to fascinate and inspire us 85 years after its first publication? Beginning with Tolkien's earliest influences and drawing on key moments from his life, Tolkien of the 21st Century is an emerging and vibrant reinterpretation of the beloved author's work. Uh-oh. Live long and prosper, is that what you're... Oh, no audio. Brian, you're muted.
You're muted, Brian. Chris.
Cooperstein.
Oh, hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hey. The coop.
Not only does it trace the genesis and inspiration for the original books, but the narrative also explores the later film and literary adaptations that have cemented its reputation as a cultural phenomenon. Delving deep into topics such as friendship, failure, the environment, diversity, and Tolkien's place in a post-COVID age, oh my goodness, Nick Groom takes us on an unexpected journey through Tolkien's world, revealing how it is more relevant now than perhaps Tolkien himself ever envisioned. Okay, I bet I'm going to have a lot of red ink on this one. Nick Groom is currently Professor of Literature and English at the University of Macau, M-A-C-A-U, having previously held positions at the universities of Chicago, Stanford, and Exeter, where he holds an honorary professorship. He is the author of The Vampire, A New History, Yale University Press, among other books. So, this could be a very, could have a lot of topics for a lot of debate.
Oh, yeah.
This could be a highly debatable one, which would be interesting, right? You know, to see those interpretations. And then I got a nice, new, shiny kind of collector's edition of the Silmarillion, because my regular ones are pretty, like this is the one I read the most.
Yeah.
It's all
That looks
falling
pretty
apart.
Go out there, show it off.
So this is the battered one.
Yep.
But this is the nice new one. I haven't taken out the plastic yet. But I will do so now. Unboxing. Live unboxing. Look at that nice little green. I can't see the green on it. Yeah, a little plastic out because I'm close to the lights here.
You okay?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, he just
I sat up and actually I'm supposed to now, so
he just
Oh.
knocked a few of the books down.
Alright. I don't know if you can see. It's got like green and there's a whole bunch of Elvish runes in the... I can't quite... It's too blasted, sorry. Oh, and nice map, I assume. There's something.
Hawk, I'm seeing, for your window, I'm seeing really a four-way cut of all four of us. Is there any way that your
You're
window
not.
can
Oh,
show
you're not seeing us.
you?
You're not seeing me.
I'm seeing you as 1/4 of your screen.
Yeah, that's about right.
Is there any way you can toggle it so that your window just shows
not
you?
not easily because of the
Okay.
broadcast. Well, this is a different map.
Looks like everybody's cold there.
Yeah.
It's only 46 degrees in here
I'll go to gallery view. Maybe I can see you all
because
better that way.
we need donations to. We've had to keep the power off to not run up the bill. Anyway, it has a couple of separate maps that are in here as well, which is nice. So yeah, it's a nice, lovely version.
Oh, never mind. I can see you better now.
Oh,
I toggled my tile view.
The next one, The Making of Middle-earth, The Worlds of Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings by Christopher Snyder. Cross the threshold to Middle-earth. In this groundbreaking work, medieval scholar Christopher Snyder masterfully connects all of the threads of influence on j.r.r. Tolkien that infused his creation of Middle-earth. And
Title again?
The Making of Middle-earth, The Worlds of Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings by Christopher Snyder, S-N-Y-D-R. And the pages are done very much in the Tor style of artwork as far as that fake weathered look and such.
Yeah.
It's fairly artistic. There's a lot of artwork and photos in here.
Oh, nice.
So there's one of Professor Tolkien, and oh yeah, lots of photos from, okay. This one looks really interesting. Yeah, it's going through the history, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien's Middle Ages. I think this one could be really good to do sections of a chapter at a time for discussion. I think that will be a great resource. And it's a nicely, gorgeous embossed cover. It's very shiny, metallic. You're muted, Brian.
Looks nice.
Yes. So I think this might have some really interesting stuff in it. All right. As inevitably happens, I am always grateful for people who buy me gifts of books and such, and especially of Tolkien. But I would ask, please don't buy the David Day books. I keep getting copies of David Day books, and generally when we've gone through them, they've been terrible. They're like way off base. They've been badly edited, everything. So, but anyway, somebody gave me another one, and we can look through and critique it. So, it's an encyclopedia of Tolkien, the history and mythology that inspired Tolkien's world, by David Day. And it's yet again in the faux leather. Yep, you've got one. Have you been through it? Is it just as bad as the rest of the stuff?
It's terrible. Yeah, and my daughter gave it to me, so I just.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do? It's worth saying to warn people away from.
Well, they say all that glitters is not gold.
Yes.
This is really true because.
But that's all of David Day's. Like all of his stuff on Tolkien, and he's probably got other stuff, but I only read Tolkien. They're all terrible, and it's like he just cranks this crap out, and it's awful. And he's
what's
everywhere.
Wrong with them? I haven't read any of those editions. Is it just not put together well?
It's completely.
So look up Tolkien Gateway.
Yeah, he makes.
Start with that.
Okay, go ahead.
Tolkien Gateway, and then type in David Day. That will give you a good start on understanding.
You want to read a little of that?
He's Tolkien. He's a Tolkien fan. I mean, I'll give him that.
But he's not a good
the problem
scholar.
is that his scholarship is shoddy. He puts things together. He leaves errors and he doesn't correct them in his books. And so it's kind of a mashup. Like this is the frontispiece for this. Now I think this is supposed to be showing probably Orome fighting Morgoth, maybe.
I don't know. But he just kind of throws stuff together, and it's really not well thought out, and it's badly written, badly edited, and he makes stuff up.
A better editor.
Well, it's more than that. He makes claims that are just patently false over and over and over again.
Oh, okay.
I try to dissuade people from getting any of his products. But he's everywhere. You see him like at Costco and Barnes and Noble, and
Yeah.
like his books are everywhere. He's made a
Well,
lot
that's
of
good
deals.
to know because I've been trying to work on my collection of
Yeah,
the,
stay away from
of
David Day.
books.
Just
so.
don't. Yeah, every single one of the books we've looked at, they've just been terrible.
I have a reference copy of it so I can refer to it, but
Yep.
yeah, like I
Yeah,
said,
I've been.
I can't recommend it.
Yep, it's unfortunate. All right, and the last one here is John Ronald's Dragons, the story of J.r.r. Tolkien by Carolyn McAllister, illustrated by Eliza Wheeler, and it's a big, full-size color like children's storybook, and gorgeously. And I'll bring it up to the camera closer. John Ronald was a boy who loved horses and trees and strange sounding words. But most of all, John Ronald loved dragons. Before J.r.r. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, he was a young boy who saw dragons in the world all around him. The idea of dragons thrilled him. He liked to imagine dragons when he was alone and with his friends, and when life got hard or sad. But as much as he looked for a dragon, he never actually found one. Until one day, when he was a grown man, but still very much a boy at heart, he decided to create one of his own. Caroline McAllister teaches English at Guildford College, and every year takes students to Oxford, England, to study fantasy in the setting where Tolkien lived and wrote. She lives in Greensboro, North Carolina. Well, that's cool that she does that with her students.
Yeah.
Eliza Wheeler, the illustrator, wrote and illustrated the New York Times bestseller Miss Maple Seeds, and enjoys eating Hobbit food and reading Tolkien aloud with her friends. She divides her time between the coast of California and the riverbanks of Wisconsin. And this looks like a lot of fun. The green screen is doing things because it's got a greenish tint to it. It's making it disappear. Here, let me turn off the chroma for a second so you can actually see it. Because anything with green will just vanish. All right, there we go. Oh, maybe not. It's too bright. Yeah, it's all there. Kind of. All right, so the interior, gorgeous, and let's see. Yeah, it's very much appropriate for kids. Man. It starts out with John Ronald was a boy who loved horses and trees and strange sounding words. But most of all, John Ronald. Anyway, so it's like continues from where we left off. But so he's going through his villages and seeing animals, and it looks like this would be great for little kids. So maybe we'll go through that at some point. So that's what's been added to my collection. Thank you very much to those family members and friends who gifted those. I'm very grateful, and we'll share them with the community over time.
Did anyone else receive any Tolkien-related Christmas presents that they wanted to share?
Bueller?
Just the fall of Arthur.
Good, good. All right. Well then.
I'm so sorry, but I've got to head out now.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so
It's been
much
a
for
great
joining
meeting.
us.
Yeah, thank you, Esther.
We hopefully will see
Thank
you
you.
next month. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
All right.
Make sure to give me those notes for the rest of the meeting.
All right. Be well.
Namadia.
Namaste.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
All right, Brian. What do you want to do next? Oh, you're muted. Brian, you are muted.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, it's because when I type, as Gary pointed out once, I'm clacking away loudly on my keyboard, so I was trying to spare his ears.
Typing with gusto.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, I'm done typing in now. Yeah, so let's go ahead and have a discussion. So, Chris, what we were talking about as we read through the notes from last Actually, I don't know if you can see these. Can you see the notes on the chat or not?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. So I won't go over those, or you can look at those if you'd like. All right, so let's go ahead and have a discussion on the fall of Arthur. I'd like to read an introduction actually by from Bullfinch's Mythology,
Please.
which is a helpful little piece on
that's a
paper
great book.
here. And then Anthony, feel free to give us any historical background you would like to, but just to revisit this. We shall begin our history of King Arthur by giving those particulars of his life which appear to rest on historical evidence, and then proceed to record those legends concerning him which form the earliest portion of British literature.
Brian, what
Arthur
page?
was-
What page?
I am on page 297.
Thank you.
Arthur was a prince of the tribe of Britons called Silures, whose country was South Wales, the son of Uther, named Pendragon, a title given to an elective sovereign, paramount over the many kings of Britain. He appears to have commenced his martial career about the year 500, and was raised in the Pendragonship about 10 years later. He is said to have gained 12 victories over the Saxons. The most important of them was that of Baden, by some supposed to be Bath, by others Berkshire. This was the last of his battles with the Saxons, and checked their progress so effectually that Arthur experienced no more annoyance from them, and reigned in peace until the revolt of his nephew Modred, 20 years later, which led to the fatal battle of Camlan in Cornwall in 542. Modred was slain, and Arthur, mortally wounded, was conveyed by sea to Glastonbury, where he died and was buried. Tradition preserved the memory of the place of his interment within the abbey, as we are told by Giraldus Cambrensis, who was present when the grave was opened by command of Henry II about 1150, and saw the bones and sword of the monarch and a leaden cross let into his tombstone with the inscription in rude Roman letters, "Here lies buried the famous King Arthur in the island Avalonia." This story has been elegantly versified by Wharton. A popular traditional belief was long entertained among the Britons that Arthur was not dead, but had been carried off to be healed of his wounds at Fairyland, and that he would reappear to avenge his countrymen and reinstate them in the sovereignty of Britain. And then he quotes from Wharton, which I'll skip, and then say, it must not be concealed that the very existence of Arthur has been denied by some. Milton says of him, as to Arthur, more renowned in songs and romances than in true stories, who he was and whether ever any such reigned in Britain has been doubted heretofore, and may again with good reason. Modern critics admit that there was a prince of this name, and find proof of it in the frequent mention of him in the writings of the Welsh bards. But the Arthur of romance, according to Mr. Owen, a Welsh scholar and antiquarian, is a mythological person. Arthur, he says, is the great bear, as the name literally implies, Arctos Arcturus. And perhaps this constellation, being so near the pole, and visibly describing a circle in a small space, is the origin of the famous round table. And then it goes on to telling the actual mythology of Arthur. Anyway, so that is the kind of the official, kind of as passed down, kind of a background. There are variant versions which locate Arthur's reign not in Cornwall and buried at Glastonbury, but actually reigning in North Wales, which extended into northern England, and being buried back in Wales. Anyway, so those are kind of some of the roots of the Arthurian story. Just to recap, I think we talked about that a few months ago. So, Anthony, anything else we need to go over before talking about the fall of Tolkien, or any of the notes that Christopher wrote that you wanted to point us to before we actually look at what Tolkien wrote himself?
I don't think so. I just want to say that the fall of Arthur itself kind of reminds me of the sort of the heroic lays that you see in medieval literature, as well as what Tolkien himself wrote for his own legendarium, as seen in Book 3 of the History of Middle-earth series, the Lays of Beleriand. So, yeah, other than that, I don't think I have anything else to say. notice that Tolkien kind of takes elements from both English and French sources. Like the character of Lancelot is, I believe, a French invention. Same with the Holy Grail. I don't think the Holy Grail is mentioned in all this call. Perhaps if Tolkien had continued, maybe he would somehow incorporate it. But yeah, as it stands, though, I think the poem is unfinished, and you know, one wonders whether if Tolkien had finished it, he would have wanted it published.
Not till he had niggled at it much more.
Yeah. Yeah, his perfectionistic tendencies.
Yeah. Thus, so many unfinished works.
Yeah.
Just a reminder that Arthur is mentioned along with a number of his knights in the Mabinogion, but yeah, a much less continental romance version for sure. So, and I did not see Lancelot referred to in here. So yeah, that's correct. All right, good comments there. Thank you, Anthony. I really just focused my time on reading what Tolkien wrote, the unfinished poem. I didn't go in depth on what the analysis that Christopher gave, but there's a lot of really great material in the book, including, I found, a very helpful appendix on Old English verse. I've enjoyed writing in Old English verse, well, not in Old English myself, since I'm not fluent, but in that style. And so that's worth reading, I think, to be able to access the meaning and the structure of much of our, Anglo-Saxon literature, whether it be Beowulf or other examples. There's a little book on Anglo-Saxon I had for years called Anglo-Saxon Poems, and it includes ones like The Dream of the Rood and riddles. There's a whole ton of Anglo-Saxon riddles. And it's really wonderful to see, kind of like, before the conquest, you basically had the people who conquered Arthur's land, illiterate pagans. There's this change in their culture, so there's still a warrior kind of mentality, but begins to be more, there's like a flowering of culture and literacy and in their own language. So it's kind of cool to see what that looks like. But anyway, yeah, good stuff. Any comments from Gary or the others before we dive into the first section?
No, I mean, I know the story of Arthur, or at least know how the different versions are. I think you guys covered it very well. And, so there's Arthur and was it Camelot, Avalon, whatever, and Morgoth, or not Morgoth, Mordred, who kind of screws the pooch afterwards.
So I found it very interesting that in the introduction, the foreword, what we have here is an understanding that Tolkien wrote it in the early 1930s, and so therefore it was basically pushed into the shadows, and he didn't finish working on it because of taking up The Hobbit, right?
Mm-hmm.
His work on The Lost Road and his publication of The Hobbit, The Emergence of Numenor, The Myth of the World Made Round and the Straight Path, and The Approach of the Lord of the Rings. So it's just fascinating to see that I would say the very reason why we don't actually have a finished Fall of Arthur is because we got the Lord of the Rings, people. So I'm sad that this was not finished, but I'm kind of happy that he put it aside.
Well, he struck out on his own. I mean,
Yes.
Including new languages and new kingdoms and everything else. So really made his mark.
Absolutely. So let's get started, shall we? Let's go to section 1.
Yeah.
Canto 1. Because right from the get-go, there's some references in here which remind us of perhaps of Middle Earth, right? Okay, first would someone like to read the first 4 lines there? Just sounds so great to read it out loud. Anybody want to volunteer that likes to read out loud?
Sure, I can.
Thanks, Anthony.
So, Canto 1. How Arthur and Gawain went to war rode into the east. Arthur eastward in arms purpose, his war to wage on the wild marshes, over sea sailing to Saxon lands. From the Roman realm rode defending, thus the time. Yes. You want to stop there?
Go ahead and finish the page. Let's get the whole page, if that's okay, Hawk.
Oh, he's not here, so.
Yeah, I think that we're okay copyright wise if you just read the first page there.
Thus the tides of time to turn backward, and the heathen to humble. His hope urged him that with harrying ships they should hunt no more on the shining shores and shallow waters of South Britain, booty seeking. As when the earth dwindles in autumn days, and soon to its setting the sun is waning, under mournful mist, then man will lust for work and wandering, while yet warm floweth blood sun kindled. So burnt his soul after long glory for a last essay of pride and prowess to improve setting, will unyielding in war with fate. So,
Yes. Very good. Thank you, Anthony.
you're welcome.
All right, so it carries on. So we have in this, so I'll just start with kind of a recap of section 1 and then we'll have a discussion. So Arthur is obviously at the peak of his power, but he, in this version of the story, goes to teach those heathen to humble them, and goes and makes war on the continent. So he leaves Britain, goes across to fight, and so as it says here, for a last essay of pride and prowess. So he's wanting to go while he still has a chance. It's like, before, he has to use a walker, he's gonna get out there and kick some butt. So, but then there's this sense of fate here in the second page there. Fate fell woven, forward draven. So he moves forward, he goes, he trusts Britain to Mordred. Mordred is all here. Well, okay, I won't comment. I'll just go to the recap and then we can kind of pick this apart. So Mordred then says Mordred will take care of the realm for him. Arthur goes east, but Lancelot doesn't have with him, but he conquers a number of places, and Gawain is with him as well as other allies, and he's successful, and he finds himself in the endless hills, lonely lands, and he comes to Mirkwood's margin under mountain shadows, on the houseless hills. So he's out there in the wilderness, and then in this time, there's this kind of voice of the storm, and they're talking. There's a very interesting kind of interplay there with nature, and while it's describing this scene, what we can see as time moves on, and they're encamped there, they hear a horn in the hills trembling, and what's come to them is a message that Arthur's been too long from his home, that 100 chiefs have left from the hidden islands. So basically these are Saxons, probably Alamein, so Germans and others who have come across Dragon Crowd, they drive over dark billows. So and then talks about different places that have been attacked: York and Lincoln and Kent. Trust not Mordred; he's false to faith. So this is when Arthur learns of Mordred's treason, and how even in Britain there are those who are helping Mordred. So this is really bad news. So Arthur's angry. He's just silent, and then he summons Gawain to council. So he talks about what to do. Arthur contemplates if he had Lancelot and Lancelot's allies. That would help a lot. But of course, this is post Lancelot's affair with Guinevere, and of course, so Guinevere had been forgiven, but Lancelot not forgiven. So there's this sense in which they're estranged. So he wishes he had Lancelot with him. Gawain suggests it's better to have fewer soldiers that you know you can trust rather than a lot, but with knights that you don't know that you can trust. And so he says, let us ride westward and sail over sea with sudden vengeance. So that's where the first section ends. Comments on the first section? Canto 1.
Well, there's a couple interesting things here. Line 42, from the mouths of the Rhine or many kingdoms. So he's sitting in Rotterdam area before it's all been developed, and he is facing lands that get to Mirkwood's margin, and so there's a mention of Mirkwood here, which in some ways is similar and in some ways is dissimilar to what you find in the Lord of the Rings.
Talk about that. What's similar and what's dissimilar?
Mirkwood in the Lord of the Rings is a relatively flat forest, if you will, and this one seems to have hills and deep valleys and various other things. But I find it interesting that it is mentioned here in the poem, and so he's drawing on something very old.
You're muted again, Brian.
Sorry. The rest of you, did you notice any parallels between the Mirkwood in, as he described it in here, that he's camped right next to, and the Mirkwood in Middle-earth? Anything that struck you in his descriptions that is similar, since the topography and the geography is different?
Yeah, well, there's no spiders.
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say.
I said, what's the same?
I know you did.
Well, I'm looking at Christopher Tolkien's notes on this section on the reference to Mirkwood. And he says that I cannot say whether my father intended a more precise meaning in his use of this ancient legendary name for a dark boundary force separating peoples. But since Arthur's host marched from the mouths of the Rhine over many kingdoms to go ever east and onward, and since the forest of Mirkwood lay on the houseless hills, ever mounting vast and vanquished, it seems that they were now far to the east of the regions of Saxon settlement. So it looks like the similarities between Tolkien's version of Mirkwood as seen in Hobbit versus this one as seen in Paul Arthur really just end with this sort of dark boundary force separating peoples.
I've got a question. Is Mirkwood in legend and also in mythology? Legend and mythology is two different things, sort of. But was that kind of a common place for a deep, dark forest with all kinds of dangerous things moving around, or what? That's what I'm thinking. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know of any. I don't know what the ultimate etymology is or origin of Mirkwood. I suppose we can look it up and Tolkien gave it. The source.
Mirkwood. I do remember Gandalf saying that one time it was called Greenwood.
Yeah.
Now it's changed.
Yeah, that's a separate thing. So you're talking within world, that the mythology within the world, that's one thing. as opposed to like in our world. So which one do you mean? Do you mean like in our world?
I was thinking in our world, it's probably used, I mean,
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the map of east of Rotterdam. There is two forests. One happens to be relatively strangely shaped, just like Mirkwood. And then southeast towards Eindhoven and Antwerp is another larger forest that probably has been cut down to its present state of mixed forest. But there's definitely a dark forest east of Rotterdam and Amsterdam that might be the place.
That's a great question. I think I'm going to put a quote in there as well from Wikipedia, which is another possibility. It really depends on how far east Arthur went, right? Like, if you read it as like the least, like what's the least distance Arthur can have traveled, it would be like where Chris is talking about, because the ground is starting to rise. The Netherlands is actually pretty flat. So you have to, towards the edges, it starts to rise. And so you get into like Luxembourg, and if you get up east there into kind of the German border with it, that's when you start to get into those areas of forest, maybe, or kind of East Netherlands, like you were talking about, where the sea is not as prevalent. But I think the maximum, if you want to establish a minimum and maximum distance, so if in the book here he says many kingdoms, and so going back to Anthony's quotation there, that might mean that Tolkien's idea here, his might assailed. Actually, go back. Halls and temples of the heathen kings, his might assailed, marching in conquest from the mouths of the Rhine or many kingdoms. So it's halls and temples, and so I mean honestly, at this point, as Tolkien knows, the Frisians and the tribes that are kind of where the Dutch are now are basically worshiping trees. They're not in temples or halls so much. So that might seem to indicate further east, and therefore more dire. If Arthur is that far away.
Yeah, I mean the Rhine River goes on the western border of the Black Forest in southeast Germany, and it's possible that it could be that he gets to.
Well, that's a very good point. I think it could be any of these, but I think in a sense, don't you feel like at different times each of these forests would have represented to the people who lived near it a Mirkwood? Not the Mirkwood, but a Mirkwood. Like this is a deep forest separating peoples. I even think
certainly in Germany today that is the case. I spent the summer in Tübingen, which is surrounded by forest, about 20 minutes drive from the Bodensee, which is where the Rhine exits a big lake that's kind of between Austria and Switzerland and South Germany. And it was very forested. When you walked into one of the forests, it was thick, lush trees that you really couldn't pass through unless you were on a road. Much like what Western Washington would be like.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Well, that would be, almost impenetrable. Do you guys get the feeling, why is he at the margins of Mirkwood? Is it because he's been fighting and conquering these different groups, and then that he basically gets as far as he can, and that's where he's at? He's up against Mirkwood, or do you read it a different way?
I think he just was reaching sort of almost the end point of his conquest. Because after Tolkien says that, thus at last came they to Mirkwood's margin under mountain shadows. Waste was behind them and walls before them. On the houseless hills, ever higher mounting vast, unvanquished lay the vale forest, dark and dreary were the deep valleys, and almost as if they're almost coming upon this impenetrable barrier.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to also mention this phrase, the houseless hills. Tolkien uses also, and it's in, I'm quoting from Michael Martinez's website here, when he answers the question, who are the foes who live within a day's march of Bree? So I'm going to just read this briefly. Question, or who are the foes who live within a day's march of Bree? Answer, in the Council of Elrond, Aragorn falls into a sort of match with Boromir, who has just spoken passionately about the vital role Gondor has played in the defense of the West. Aragorn says, if Gondor, Boromir, had been a stalwart tower, we have played another part. Many evil things there are that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The North would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. But when dark things come from the houseless hills, or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands, or in the homes of simple men at night, if the Dunedain were asleep, or were all gone into the grave? So I'm going to stop there. And so that to me evokes, as you think west of the Misty Mountain, of course, Mirkwood is east of the Misty Mountains, and as Gary referred to earlier, it was previously known as Greenwood the Great before it was corrupted. And Dol Guldur was started in the south,
and shrunk considerably too.
That's right. But this kind of these two phrases that Tolkien uses in The Fall of Arthur, Canto 1, the emergence of Mirkwood, right? It gives us that sense of, like Anthony was saying, these woods separating peoples, and then as Chris pointed out, that still happens today in Germany. When you look at, I put a link to the Rhine River, its watershed, you can see kind of how far the Rhine River goes in Europe. So the Black Forest may be a model. But then even in, of course this is earlier than his work on Middle-earth, but if you think about how he then reuses that phrase, you can tell he loves it. The houseless hills. These are lonely hills. These are hills in which no people live. And if you lived in those times, you were very afraid. These are the days when wolves killed people. I mean, nowadays people, there's a lot of controversy about wolves.
Dragons.
But back then, I mean, really, in real life, safety in numbers, man, right?
Yeah.
So Arthur is really out in Timbuktu when he hears this bad news that his kingdom, that Mordred has basically opened up the door to all these other, basically to the Saxons, right? Any other comments on Canto 1? No surprises on Mordred's treason there.
Yeah.
Why did Arthur trust it to him, though? Right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's my big question. Like, he's kind of a worm tongue here, isn't he?
Yes, Grima.
Isn't he? Talk about that for a minute. Why would Arthur trust his kingdom to Mordred?
Well, some of the backstory, I'm looking in the book I've been listening to, and I'm trying to pull it up here. My history. Mary Stuart's version of the Arthurian legend, kind of from the mostly from the story of Merlin's side. Mordred was a relative of Arthur who was trusted by Arthur, and he grew up with Mordred from boyhood. and so they were best friends, and that seems to be, at least in my mind, the reason why.
So the kinship bonds are stronger back then than they are now. Perhaps, at least in society, that would have been seen as, this is my family, this is my relative. So that would be a strong motivation for trusting someone.
That would make the treachery even more evil.
Indeed.
Right.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also Mordred. Well, in Geoffrey Monmouth's version, he was his nephew, Arthur's nephew.
Excuse me.
And later variants most often characterize him as Arthur's villainous bastard son, born of an incestuous relationship with his half-sister, Morgause.
That must have been more common back in the day.
Yeah.
Wasn't Mordred also an accomplished warrior?
Oh, I'm sure he was.
Yeah, which would lend Arthur to believing
Yes.
he was worthy to
Yeah, he would have been like
a kingdom for temporarily.
a captain or a someone that he had used in the past who had proven himself in battle.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because Mordred, there's some sources seem to say that it seems to be derived from the Latin moderatus, moderate. But I'm not buying that because I know that Geoffrey of Monmouth borrowed heavily from Welsh sources.
Yeah, and Mordred's Welsh name is Mithraut.
Exactly, and I'm finding that there's a fair amount of like when you kind of look at the different possibilities, it's kind of a deep dive into what that word there means, and so there's no consensus for it, but it's possible that it could be the moderatus. I don't know if those of you who are interested in trying to figure out more on that. I mean, it sounds Welsh to me, which it does. He did borrow it from that, but Welsh was influenced by Latin, so it can kind of be a circular argument. So there's no clear answer there, but there's a link if anybody wants to see it. So, okay, so he was a kin. He was a nephew. Someone who probably had proven his ability on the field, and so why not, right? Here's someone who you can be expected to rely on. And at this point, we have to remember that he had not betrayed Arthur yet, at least in Tolkien's version of the story, right? He's not given any reason to be distrusted. So as Gary mentioned, how that would hurt even more. All right, so shall we move on to Canto 2 then?
Yes.
Does anybody need a break? Or are you guys okay?
I think I'm okay.
I think you're on mute this time, Gary.
I said I need a break to, as I
Okay.
say in Japan, the honorable hand washing, please.
Yes. 2-minute break, guys.
All right.
Looking for something?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see.
Did for drops. Stop and drops.
Huh?
It's over in the hall.
Oh, hops and drops?
Yeah.
Okay. Eating the one at the Spokane Valley Mall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't wait. I'm starving.
Yeah, me too. What do you like to get from here?
I'm not sure. It's been a while since we've been in there.
Yeah. Man, it's so freezing.
Those ankles are frozen.
Oh. $6 out.
Better than negative 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 7 or 8 here, but the wind chill is about minus 25.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, the wind chill definitely makes it worse.
Yeah, it's been windy all day and all of yesterday, and it has been quite blustery. And, yeah.
I went out east side the other day to go for a drive, and I was with the house, and I swear, turn, just get around the edge of the house, and the wind just hits me,
Yeah.
and I literally felt like I was frozen.
Yeah. It's like you can always get frostbite.
Yeah.
In a short amount of time.
Your heat on at your house?
Not at the moment, but once we get there, it's gonna.
Okay. But it's freezing in the house right now.
Well, I turned it off because I'm not there.
Yeah, it's you.
Is it a break?
Yeah, we're at a 2-minute break.
Yep. And I've got the opposite problem is I've got a heat pump, so I have to actually leave it on
Yeah.
or else it never recovers.
What do you mean it never recovers?
Well, when it's 6 outside,
Yeah.
it's more energy efficient to leave it on than try to use the auxiliary heat to be in recovery mode.
You live in an old house?
No, I live in the opposite. I live in a manufactured home that's very energy efficient with a relatively small heat pump.
I think you manufactured that story.
Well, it's a 2002 Valley Quality Pump Home manufactured in Montana, or no, manufactured in Yakima, and it was originally destined for Montana and has, 10-inch thick walls and R60 in the ceiling, and
Jeez.
it was built for Montana, but it happens to be here in the Tri-Cities.
Built in Montana by folks who know what modular homes should feel like.
But these are not your father's manufactured homes. They're quite nice.
Well, it doesn't really matter as long as there's room for books, right, Cooperstein?
Amen.
I like the quote from, is it Erasmus, who said, "With money, I buy books, and if there's some left over, I buy food."
Yeah, right?
All right, on to
I resemble that
two.
remark.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Gary Haglund in the room by the miracle of modern technology. Welcome back, Gary. Let's go on to Canto 2. The Frisian ship brought news, and Mordred gathered his host and went to Camelot seeking the queen. So this one, that's kind of the very briefest recap. but this deals with you're clear when you're starting the canto. Of course, it's clear that it's a new division, a new section, so you know you're kind of like starting from a different perspective. But I love this first part. Dark wind came driving over deep water. From the south sweeping, surf upon the beaches. Roaring sea, rolling endless. Huge hoar-crested hills of thunder. The world darkened. Wan rode the moon through stormy clouds, streaming northward. So we're kind of taken on a journey away from where Arthur is, and it shows us there's this ship coming from France. It says dark and dragon proud. So we know that this is a barbarian ship. It shows Mordred, and it takes us inside his mind, which is kind of unpleasant to be inside Mordred's mind, actually. And then it talks about Guinevere and how she is sleeping there, and how Mordred comes up to her, he threatens her, and then he gets a message that from his squire Ivor, and I have to laugh here, Hawk. Are you there?
I'm here.
Do you remember? Don't you have an ancestor named Ivor?
Ivar?
Ivor?
Possibly. The Irish Ivors on my mother's side, so my other side had the Mars and the Ivors. And I grew up working on a mine that was owned by the Ivors.
Yeah.
Brian and others have done some genealogy studies and found that the Ivors, which came from County Mayo and then went to Canada and such, about 1,000 or so years ago, or 1,000 AD, I forget which. I guess that'd work out about the same. County Mayo was invaded, and one of the groups were the Ivars, and that might be who the Ivors are. The Ivors,
Possibly Vikings.
right? Yeah, as Vikings, and then settled in County Mayo, and then the name was Iricized to Ivors from Ivars. Most of the Irish are not exactly known for their height and stature.
Yeah.
But, my great-grandfather was over 6 foot, my grandfather was 6'4", my uncle was 6'4", I was 6'8". And then on the Mars side, who were also not far from there, they also were like I have cousins who are 6'6" and stuff. But that's not your typical Irish stature. So there is a high probability of some maybe Northern European Viking blood there.
Yes.
Indeed. So this ship, he hears news that the ship has come, and it's Radbod the Red, who's come, and he's dying because the ship was wrecked, and he gets a message basically saying Arthur's on his way. So then Mordred comes to Camelot to seek the queen, and so they have this discussion back and forth. He basically says she's captive. She can either be his bride, or she can be his slave. Those are the two choices. And it ends showing that she desires to leave in the middle of the night and seek refuge in Leo de Grance, which is, I believe, in Wales, which is where she came from. Anthony, does that sound right?
What was the name again? Leo de Grance?
Leo de Grance, yeah, Leo de Grance. Looks like.
Leo de Grance. Looking it up right now.
It almost sounds French.
Leo de Grancy, pretty sure. Parlez-vous français?
Ouch. You're a cruel man.
Well, Leo de Grance is not a place, but a person. He's the father. He's the father of Guinevere. His kingdom of Cameliard is usually identified with Cornwall, but may be located in the historic province of Brittany called Cornouailles.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting because Tolkien later seems to indicate that she's fleeing to Wales. But Brittany and that parallel place name of Cornwall, I've heard of before, because of course Brittany was settled by the Bretons, who were Celtic people who fled the Saxons at around this time, right? Yeah. So you really have this kind of North Sea cultural connection between Britain, where you have these Romanized Britons who would have kind of had their own structure of things, but influenced by Roman Empire, but ethnically Celtic. Ireland, which at this time is not Romanized at all, they're just pure Celtic. And then you've got Brittany, which is really people kind of leaving when the Saxons invade and they go to settle there. So anyway, okay, all right. So Canto 2. Any comments on this section?
I think that, and I don't think Tolkien was the first, but the deal with Mordred and Guinevere, and Mordred wanting to have her hand in marriage, or her be his slave, which basically he gets the same benefits. I think increases the treachery, that he shows he's a really bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of a worm tongue. I think about how Tolkien kind of hints at this, doesn't he? That Eomer senses that Wormtongue had his sights set on Eowyn as part of the plunder once he got to be the boss, if Saruman gave him authority over Rohan.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, there's a similarity right there.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of psychological tension and drama surrounding the episode with Mordred and Guinevere, because obviously Guinevere does not want to succumb to Mordred's lust, but at the same time, Mordred is a very fearsome man, to the point where according to lines 54 and 55, men trembled at his dark visage. So he's someone to be feared rather than loved. So, sort of like what Machiavelli talks about in The Prince, his famous political treatise. So, I think that Mordred is very treacherous, villainous, dark character.
You're saying he would fit well in the Song of Fire and Ice, is what you're saying.
Slash
And a Machiavellian.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Mordred's faction in, Game of Thrones.
Well, Machiavelli did say that it's better to be feared than to be liked.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So there's almost like a rival vision of leadership, right?
Yes.
Because Arthur is loved, and people follow him and serve him because he is loved. Mordred, he desires to dominate and destroy. This is a theme that Tolkien does explore quite a bit in a lot of his works, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, just like how Sauron is sort of when he's making the ring, the One Ring of power, he imputes all of his will to dominate in the ring as well as, by extension, the world.
Which is so different than how Yavanna, for example, I'm thinking of some of the different examples in the Silmarillion where we see even Aule, when he makes things, he makes dwarves not because he seeks to dominate them, right?
Yeah.
But because of the joy of making.
Yes.
although they don't have their own will yet, but Iluvatar gives them that gift. And Yavanna, she creates, the plants, the animals, flora and fauna. But Sauron desires to have power. It's a very Nietzschean kind of concept.
Yeah.
Will to power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mordred is definitely of that ilk. I'm just afraid for Guinevere in this section. Like you said, psychological tension.
The tension is line 160. Then the queen took counsel in her cold bosom, because theoretically she was barren, I think. Between fear and prudence, feigning wonder softly after silence, she dissembling and spake, my lord unlooked for were thy love speeches, and this eager suit. And so she asked for time to think it through, and it's granted instead of, no, I shall have you now.
He's so patient. One day, actually, he says that night.
And then she just flees under cover of night with her, pun intended, with those allies that she has left to rely on.
I wonder if he gives her time because he's like, well, I'm not going to give you a lot of time, but I'd much rather you come around to saying, yeah, actually, I want you to be my husband. I think
Potentially, yeah.
From a very egotistical point of view, he may say it doesn't matter whether you're my bride or my captive, because as Gary said, he gets some benefits out of the way, but it would pump him up to feel like, oh, she's consented to be my bride. I am a king. I am greater than Arthur, actually. I have successfully stolen his kingdom and his wife, and I am legitimate, right?
Yeah.
Boy, she has not left soon enough, though, has she? He says, needs must tonight that I know thy mind. Longer I grant not. If she'd waited till early morning when it was still dark, I think he would have come to her.
Uh-huh.
I think she flees in the nick of time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, he's also thinking about she gives him legitimacy, especially if she agrees to marry him.
And so she deceives him.
Yeah.
Was that wrong? Or is that, under this situation, morally acceptable because of the dire situation in which he's forcing her to
No,
be?
it's morally acceptable, there's no doubt about it.
Guinevere the fair and not Mordred only should master chance, and the tides of time turn to her purpose.
Ah, a little scheming there. Right?
Indeed.
Okay. All right. Canto 3. For sake of time, we must away. Our break of day. All right, Smith. Go ahead.
I was just clearing my throat.
Okay. So Canto 3 of Sir Lancelot, who abode in Benwick. Now this was interesting because I had to do some research on this. Anybody else do some research on this too? Like, Benwick, where's Benwick? It's not in Britain. It turns out it's part of the continental romances that Anthony was speaking about earlier.
Yeah.
That this idea of, and this is fascinating to me, that Lancelot is from this place where he has all these allies and relatives, and from this other kingdom or whatever. But the name of the place is really an anglicized version of a French place name, which so it's over across the water. However, to add another interesting layer to this, although Tolkien seems to treat it as that idea of, like you said, Anthony, that he's using a blend of both British and continental versions of Arthur, in this case, he's from across the water, some kind of place along the French coast. It turns out there's somebody who is an Arthurian scholar at the same time that Tolkien is writing this in the early 30s, and this person is writing about how the French name was it's basically, I mean, all the layers here. You've got basically the sorry, I keep saying basically. Geoffrey of Monmouth, when he writes about this, he mentions the domain of Bran the Blessed. And in French, the word for blessed is something that looks very much like Benoit, Benoit. And that when this was then translated or transcribed, again, by the French, but they changed the name from Bran to Ban. So you see King Ban is one of his allies that Lancelot knows. So we've got this kind of cross. It's like if you send a message to somebody else and they translate it, and then somebody retranslate the message and send it back to you.
Telephone, yeah.
It's going to look a little different. So it sounds like this was originally, at least according to this, and I'll put the notes in the chat. But there was a writer who basically said in a book from 1932 that this is a mistake, and it's referring really to northeast Wales, which is where Bran was a king. But it doesn't really matter because we're basing our discussion on Tolkien's version. So Lancelot is really this whole Canto 3 is about Lancelot and him struggling. So maybe somebody else can describe what is Lancelot struggling with in this canto.
Well, obviously he's been ostracized he's been exiled, and he's sent packing back to France. And I haven't read it, because I don't have the book, but anyway, he probably has heard of what's happening with Arthur and Mordred and Guinevere, and probably would like to be a part of, dispatching Mordred. I just want to guess. I don't know if that's close or not.
Yeah, I think that Lancelot is sort of pining away for Guinevere, as well as lamenting the loss of his status as sort of Arthur's right-hand man, and probably the greatest among Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, aside from like Gawain. Because at the beginning of Canto 3, Tolkien writes, that to his lady only was his love given. No man nor woman in his mind held he than Guinevere dear. Glory only, knighthood's honor, near his lady in his heart holding. By his purpose he long was loyal to his lord Arthur. Being described as peerless, and now he's been exiled and knocked off his perch, so to speak, to the point where he's, no longer among Arthur's company.
And so when the deed was done, around line 62, strong oaths they broke. Mordred in secret, mirthless watched them betwixt hate and envy, hope and torment. Thus was bred the evil and the black shadow. So I read this to mean that Lancelot may have been guilty of causing pain and desire and sin as well. And whether Lancelot knows that or not, I'm not sure, but that seems to be the case.
Yeah, so it does seem like each canto is coming from a different perspective. Canto 1 is Arthur's mostly.
Yeah.
Canto 2 is Mordred, mostly, but some Guinevere as well. The third one is Lancelot, and the sense in which, as you referred to there, Chris, they broke oaths, which you couldn't. There was not really anything worse that you could do. This was considered. This would be the equivalent of child molestation nowadays. It was seen as one of the most despicable things you could do, which, like Gary mentioned earlier, would make like Mordred's treachery again. Here's a relative. Here's someone that you, not a stranger, but someone in whom you trusted. And so, again, the wife and the great, your right hand man. And so this is perhaps also why Arthur, as a story, has had such, such a sense of permanence, right? Because these stories can be found in every century, especially, of course, the later medieval kind of chivalric understanding of courtly love. You love someone who's not your wife, but that's just more like your devotion is kind of more of an intellectual thing sometimes. But you marry for political expediency. And so some people would have been faithful to their spouses, but at the same time would have been, they wouldn't have an affair, but they would have definitely had that kind of two-story view of devotion, and as well as others, of course, who probably were, having affairs, etc. So we've got this oath breaking, but now here's the sadness. We're really looking at the consequences of that. That though Guinevere was pardoned, Lancelot has not been. And so, at the time when Arthur needs him most, Lancelot, he can't sail to go rescue his friend in his time of need. So that's really sad. It's a very sad section here. All right. Any other comments before we go to Canto 4? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and turn to Canto 4, and I'll just, again, as before, give a quick overview of this and see what you guys think. So let me pull that up here. Just trying to type in notes at the same time so I can send the notes to you guys right away. All right, so Canto 4. How Arthur returned at morn and by Sir Gawain's hand won the passage of the sea. So now, and it doesn't say at first where we're starting, but we're actually starting with Guinevere. Does somebody, maybe Chris or Hawk, you haven't read yet. Would you like to read the first opening lines of, this is it's full of nature imagery here.
Go ahead,
Any
Chris.
volunteers? Oh yeah, I have your copy. I'm sorry.
That's okay. How Arthur returned at morn and by Sir Gawain's hand won the passage of the sea. Wolves were howling on the wood's border. The windy trees wailed and trembled. The wandering leaves, wild and homeless, drifted, dying in the deep hollows. Dark lay the road through dank valleys, among mountain hills, mist encircled, to the walls of Wales in the west, frowning, brown-faced and bare, To the black mountains horsemen hastened, on the houseless stones, no track leaving, tumbling waters from the fells falling, foaming into darkness. They heard as they passed to the hidden kingdom. Night fell behind, the noise of hooves was lost in silence, in a land of shadow.
Nice. So this is really talking about Guinevere and how she has escaped at night. And on the next page, it refers to as weary as wolves through the woods stalking to the marches rode there, Mordred's hunters, huge and hungry, hounds beside them. The feute followed, fiercely baying. The word feute here I looked up, and it means the signs that animals leave behind, like tracks or scat or anything like that, that by which a hunter or a tracker would be able to discover the path, which way the animal went. So they are literally tracking Guinevere to capture her. The queen they hunted with cold hatred till their hope failed them amid houseless stones, halting hungry-eyed under the hill's menace at the walls of Wales. War was behind them and woe in Britain. Winds were shifting, Mordred waiting. So then they send a message to him that the queen is lost. He's actually found, he's by the seaward cliffs in the south country. So he's probably either all the way over by Dover, facing the continent, or he could be further west along the south country. For example, he could be any part of what is now maybe Hampshire or Wiltshire, the ports of Plymouth or Portsmouth or Southampton, all of those ancient ports are along the southern coast. And it's interesting because the Romans even had problems with the Saxons attacking from the south. And there are some Roman ruins along the southern shore of England because that was the direction from which they expected that the Saxons might try to attack. I assume because on the eastern coast of England, there was a lot of swamps and fens, and there weren't many good roads. But the Roman roads were all connected to the south coast. So if you wanted to invade, you just sailed up to the southern part, and you disembarked, and you can get right onto a highway. So I'm thinking that's why they fortified that. But here in this case, it's that Arthur is coming back to his own realm, and Mordred's worrying about this and waiting. Meanwhile, he gets this bad message that they have not been able to get Guinevere. She's escaped into Wales. And so he's angry. And then again, you're seeing more in his mind as he's brooding and kind of thinking about what's going to happen, his chances. He wonders whether Lancelot's going to come help Arthur. If he does, all is done for, and he doesn't think he'll have a chance. But if there's any way in which, if Lancelot does not come, then he thinks he'll have the upper hand. And then finally he sees all these ships coming across the channel, and he sees several symbols. He sees ships with Arthur's sign, which is, it looks like the Virgin Mary and the babe. A white lady in holy arms, a babe bearing, born of maiden. So I think that's pretty clear. It's the Madonna and child. And then we have also Gawain's ships with sails that have a rising sun on the sails, but no ships of Lancelot. So Mordred laughs, and he believes he's going to be able to defeat them. And then we have this huge sea battle, which Arthur's side wins because of Gawain helping. It's a great battle section. And then at the end of that, it says, fate yet waited, tide was turning, timbers broken, dead men and drowned, a dark jetsam were left to lie on the long beaches, rocks robed with red rose from water.
Yeah,
So-
I don't remember sea battles in other variations of Arthur. Is that also in the other variants? I don't remember that.
Yeah, I'm not
That
sure.
sounds distinctive to this one.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anybody recall sea battles in any other Arthur variants? That to me seems different.
Yeah, I think it's unique to this idea that Arthur was gone and away when the betrayal happened, as
Yeah.
opposed to in the land.
Yeah. Interesting.
It seems to echo other epic. You have other epics where there's battles at sea, but not this one. Yeah. He's really playing with this idea of when someone has gone away, and it's because of their absence that they're betrayed, to kind of highlight this tension of your own kingdom is held against you. So that must be I wonder if this is unique to Tolkien. Do we see this cropping up anywhere else in his works?
Well, there was always the link of the land to the king, and that if the king was sick, the land was sick. If the king was well, the land was well.
Right.
You're right, and that affected the people. So there was always that. I forget there's a name for that.
Yeah.
Not the divine
Sacred.
right, but something along those lines. It was all part of the feudal
Sure.
system. So that was certainly common to have that direct linkage between their well-being. And if you're away, the land would go wild without the care and tending of the person who's linked to it.
Okay. Anything else? I mean, I think this idea of, and we'll see this more in Canto 5 actually, but this idea of the unwelcome task of having to take back a kingdom that is yours.
Yeah.
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 With your own people,
Yeah.
some of your own people have turned against you.
The Japanese Warring States period, Tokugawa and all of those, there was a lot of that back and forth like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that time period.
Yeah, and the Chinese Warring era too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Chris, any comments on that, on the Japanese warring the different kingdoms, or?
Certainly, when you talk about the warring factions between each different shogunate as they ran through, each one had to give their tribute to the emperor, but they were largely left alone unless something hideous happened. But stuff happened all the time, and back to the land was sick comment. There was some belief that, at least in the Shinto belief, if your
Spirits,
ancestors
yeah.
were unhappy with what you were doing, earthquakes and tsunamis and all sorts of things would happen to you. And so I can't help but think that might be something that happened in the Arthurian time frame as well. Not necessarily Shinto, but more if the king was unhappy, if the king was unwell, things did not go well.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that the chief focus on this section is the fighting. I mean, I think one thing that Tolkien does well is he does a good job of building tension and helping to paint a word picture. And that's why, like, Helm's Deep is such a great section in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Where you have this massive battle, and he spends pages and pages describing, because he's been in battles, right? So it's like they can, when you're waging them, if it's not trench warfare at least, it's kind of, there's ebb and flow, and he seems to have studied this kind of thing before.
Well, and of course his own experiences in World War One. Helm's Deep seemed like between the Battle of Helm's Deep and the Battle of the Fields of Pelennor, those seemed, because of the vividness, he went into a lot more vivid detail than he did in a lot of other parts. That seemed to, I think, draw a lot on his Battle of the Somme and experiences like
Also,
that, I think.
Also, the Fall of Gondolin. I think he was writing that.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, when he was in the trenches,
yeah.
working on his early Silmarillion pieces, exactly.
Yeah.
But because those parts, the war parts, are like a lot of his stuff's a little loosey goosey in the detail. Like he's got little details of how it looks and things like that. But sometimes things are quickly narrated and move on. But the warring parts, not the battles like the small battles aren't so like some modern authors. He swings to the left with an uppercut, right? Really detailed battles of small battles. His small battles aren't very detailed. They're quick and over. But his big battles, he really seemed to go on at length. I mean, what he was a lieutenant, right, during all of that, and
Yeah.
so he would have experienced that part of flanks moving and all of that. So that always struck me that he went into a lot more detail with those big battles between Helm's Deep and the Pelennor Fields. Less so when it actually got to Mordor and such, and then certainly in the Silmarillion he had a lot of battles where they swept in from the north here and the piles and piles and piles of bodies and so I suspect his personal experiences influenced that in addition to all the epic, because the epics don't usually get that detailed on those battles.
I love that we have an example here of a naval ram. I mean, this is just awesome. With dread faces, dragon proud, they spurred their sea horses to sudden onset, swerving swiftly and swinging inward. And then I think you see Arthur's ships coming in among them. Bam! Beak met bulwark, burst were timbers. There was a clang of iron and crash of axes, sparked and splintered spears and helmets. The smiths of battle on smitten anvils there dinned and hammered, deadly forging wrath and ruin.
No, I could be wrong. Does that happen in Homer as well? Because there was ramming ships and stuff in Homer's work, right? They used rams.
I think so.
Yeah. To me, sometimes Tolkien feels Homer-esque in general.
Yeah.
That particular one strikes me for some reason. It's been a long time since I read Homer stuff.
Yeah.
But I did read all of it, and for me that evoked that for me very rapidly, going back to Homer stuff.
Okay.
Iliad, Odyssey, things like
Before we finish with Canto 5, the last one, can I just point out we have a magic sword in here, guys? Gawain, it says, now grim Galith, Gawain brandished his sword renowned, smiths enchanted ere Rome was built, with runes marked it, and its steel tempered strong and deadly. Forth leapt he as fire, a flame wielding. Wow. And it says, he actually jumps onto the king of Gothland's ship and slays him. I mean, wow.
Buccaneers!
Yeah.
A little bit of, who was the early Robin Hood actor, Errol Flynn?
Yeah.
A little Errol Flynn going on there?
For sure.
What's that?
For sure.
Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, Canto 5, I know we're at 3 o'clock, so let's get this done. Of the setting of the sun at Romeril, thus Arthur abode on the ebb riding. At his land he looked and longed sorely, on the grass again there green swaying, to walk at his will while the world lasted. The sweet to savour of salt mingled with wine-scented waft of clover, over sunlit turf seaward leaning, in kindly Christendom, the clear ringing of bells to hear on the breeze swaying, a king of peace, kingdom wielding, in a holy realm beside heaven's gateway. On the land he looked, lofty shining, treason trod there, trumpets sounding, in power and pride. Princes faithless on shore their shields, shameless marshalled their king betraying, Christ forsaking, to heathen might their hope turning. Men were mustering, marching southward from the east hurried, evil horsemen, as plague of fire pouring ruinous, White towers were burned, wheat was trampled, the ground groaning and the grass withered. There was woe in Britain, and the world faded. Bells were silent, blades were ringing, hell's gate was wide, and heaven distant. Wow, what a contrast he's making between the Britain he comes back to that he wished he could just stroll. I just wanted to sing, you know, it's a good Monty Python reference. He just wants to enjoy being back home in the clover, you know. Poor guy.
Yeah. Just enjoy the Shire.
Yeah.
But it's been raised.
Indeed. The wheat was trampled, ground groaning. Did you notice here, from the east hurried evil horsemen?
Yes.
There's another parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Black Riders.
The Easterlings I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Easterlings, yeah.
Although you could say that too. The Black
All those
Riders.
troublemakers from the east, which because they were on
Yep.
the west, island. Everything to the east was trouble.
So does that mean to the west of Britain is Numenor,
Yeah.
i.e. America?
That's a bit of a stretch. That's a bit of a stretch.
Oh, I don't know. We might be facing our own downfall.
Atlanta,
Scotland,
in the tropics.
or I'm sorry,
Bahamas.
Iceland, the Falkland Islands.
The Falklands are way down.
They're somewhere west.
Yeah,
You know,
they're,
ish.
yeah, they're down. Yeah, they're down at Argentina area.
Argentina, yeah,
Which is a
yeah.
very sore subject
That's
between
not what I meant.
Argentina and
The Faroes. You were thinking of the Faroe Islands, maybe.
Faroe Islands.
Cuba.
Anything else in the system?
Well, Ireland for sure is west, but then
Yeah.
even further,
Yeah,
you
the
get
Faroes.
the Faroes, yeah. I think you get the myth of Brendan, who's around this time period too, right? You get the Irish monk who basically sails west of Ireland
Mhm.
and goes and finds strange places and comes back. Anyway. Okay, so we have to get this done. So comments, this is the shortest canto because of course it's what he didn't finish. So we see here Arthur is debating, does he pity is affecting him, love for his land and his loyal people. It says he even grieves for the wicked. He's grieving those who are turning against him, or the wavering, the weak people who are just going with the wind. He cares about all of them, actually. He wants to be able to pass in peace and grant pardon, but before he can do that, he's going to have to fight, and even suggests that death lays before him. So he's kind of in this quandary, and then clearly this is as far as he got on his train when he was writing this, in the 1930s. And then this last part, does somebody want to read that last section, the end of the Fall of Arthur, where he left it off? Okay, I'll read it then. For Gawain he called, gravely speaking, dark thoughts he showed in his deep trouble. Liege and kinsman, loyal and noble, my tower and Taj, my true counsel, the path before us to Paraledith. We have won the water, the walls remain, and man with menace might defy they. Do we rightly choose ruthless onset, to traitor keeper, toll of death, to pay for passage, no price counting, on dread venture at disadvantage, all hope to hazard? My heart urgeth that best it were that battle waited, to other landing our arms leading, let us trust the wind and tide ebbing, to waft us westward. Delightful.
Grey Havens.
Yeah. Well, Avalon, same thing, right? You know, the ladies of Avalon
Right.
off ship to the west, yeah.
Yeah.
Or even another place that's not so heavily defended, right?
Yeah.
In the Spanish Armada, if you've ever studied that in 1588, when Spain assembled a fleet to conquer Britain, one of the reasons why the Spanish Armada failed is because if you think of the island here, Spain comes here, and you don't sail up very often. it's really the prevailing winds take you this way. And so they basically have to go around it. The storm carries them away, and so they're having to, they get wrecked, etc. But I'm thinking Arthur also is in a sense thinking, well, if I could sail and maybe land here and march my way up, because if he wasn't Cornwall, this is where he would be, rather than over here. You know, it depends, but who knows?
Well, that's great. We're running a little over here, so we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Any last comments on the fact that Tolkien did not finish this, or what you think about Tolkien's effort at taking a stab at doing Arthurian legend?
Wasn't he known for not finishing or postponing his works? Quite a bit.
Oh
Took him a long time to.
yeah.
I think it took him quite a while to finish everything, just to
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, 13 years, 3 complete rewrites, basically.
Yeah.
You gotta get a third done and start over, then 2 thirds done and start over, then go through it a third time.
I got you mad.
You were warning.
The couplet format of the poem with the left and the right, I wonder. I wonder sometimes if this was to be kind of a call and response style reading of this poem, that one person would say, "There, Lancelot," and the response from the other side of the room would have been low and softly, and then to himself singing and the sun greeted. So you're sitting in the middle of the room with a ping pong going back and forth as the live reading occurs, or a pair of bards.
That'd be fun. You should try it sometime.
It just adds to the ambiance of the reading.
Yeah, that's a great idea. The reason why he does that is because it is part of the structure of Anglo-Saxon poetry, and it's called a caesura. So there's a link there in the chat. I'm not really sure why Anglo-Saxon poetry tended to have it, but you see it in Beowulf as well. And it's a rhythmical pause in the poem's flow. And I wonder if part of the reason for it could have been, in the past, you could have had someone respond, as it were. Certainly, a lot of, came from a time when people were not literate, it's pre-literate, right? So oral tradition, you're memorizing. Maybe breaking it would actually make it easier to memorize.
That's true for chunking. Yeah.
I mean, instead of Shakespeare, where it's always iambic pentameter, you got to remember much longer lines.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's really great. What's the plan for next session, assuming we're,
wherever we are.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we talked about is the possibility of you doing a recap for D&D's 50th anniversary, or we could talk about music, or we could take a stab at the Kalevala, or the Nibelungen Lied, but we all had said maybe we wanted to invite the guy from the Wagner Society to come back and talk to us again, because he did a great presentation. But I don't have those contact details, so unless you want to send those to me, Hawk, and have me get in touch with him.
Yeah, if you ping me, I can send that to you at some point.
Okay, that'd be nice. If we can get that going That'd be a
I
couple
wonder,
months.
are there any Arthurian societies? Like there's Wagnerian societies, are there Arthurian societies?
That's a good question. There's gotta be something out there.
I don't know, just curious. Because it'd be really interesting to get their input on this as well, but,
I think it's going to be a pretty busy month for you in February. What should we do that's going to be easiest for you?
yeah, I mean, I asked me for that info, I'll give it to you, and then he said, talking about the music, that's always a straightforward one. There's also the Tolkien music list from Professor Chris Seaman and all of that.
So maybe we should just do music because
Sure.
it's more straightforward and
Yeah.
requires less preparation.
Yeah, that works. Tolkien
And that's
music
something
and
that's
all that.
accessible to all of us.
Yep, and I have I have those old records and cassettes and everything with Tolkien and
Okay?
other composers, and commenting is very interesting.
Okay. So
all right.
everybody, do you find what examples of Tolkien-inspired music that you would
Yeah,
like
the
to
Tolkien
share?
music list is this huge repository.
Yeah, of course. But it'd be nice to get some buy-in if people have favorites or whatever.
Yeah, well, and I've done a number of radio shows with that using that list as the source.
And then we can move from there to music within Tolkien's legendarium
Yeah,
examples.
all of the creation is permeated.
We have to start with the Einolindale, that's what Hawk was just referring to
Yep.
there, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That would be great. So everybody remember, if you haven't, please consider donating. rpgresearch.com/donate. If enough people do it, we could save the center. If we don't get 10 grand by February, we will lose the center. And then there'll be a whole cascade effect of problems after that too. So spread the word, get it around, please, and please, anything you donate, whatever amount, every little bit helps and adds up, and just, yeah, if it propagates, then it can be done. Appreciate everything, and so we'll see where we are next month. I don't know if it'll be here or if it'll be all from our houses. I don't know. But wish you all the best, and thank you for making it. And remember, everybody, our website's tolkienscholars.org, and our Twitter is /TolkienScholars. You can get sometimes there's a lag, but we get our meeting notes up on the Tolkien Scholars website, and then the links to join. And we meet every second Saturday of the month from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on youtube.com/RPG Research to meet live. If you want to be part of the meetings, feel free to just email tolkienscholars@gmail.com, and we can give you the login info to join the meeting room if you want to participate in that. And of course, you can always comment in the chat on the YouTube channel. But wherever you may be well. Namarie.
Bye, everyone.
See you later. Yeah, thanks, Hawk.
You are welcome. I'm glad you could make it. I hope it's not the last time here.